Good morning and welcome to week 5 of class. You are now in the thick of the semester and we are almost at our halfway point. So congratulations on continuing your work in this class this semester. Let's start with a little bit of the get to know Jake questions if you haven't gotten tired of these already. You may notice that I am wearing Bethany attire, and in looking at my last several videos, 3 of the 4 I'm wearing the exact same shirt, for which I apologize. I'm not making all of these videos at the same time, as you can tell. But it just happens that we have something called Bethany Fridays here at Bethany. The president of the college has encouraged us to wear Bethany attire on Fridays, and I only own so much of it. So the Friday mornings when I make these videos, you see me wearing similar Bethany attire. So that explains that. If there are things you guys want to know about me, I encourage you to go ahead and email me or post a video and ask me some questions. You can ask me questions about the things you see behind me in my office. You can ask me questions about my academic pedigree or my interests. I'd love to engage with you guys on some of those topics as well as the topics of the class. Many of you have emailed me specific questions. Many of you have emailed me concerns with the ability to get access to things. And that dialogue is important, and I appreciate your guys' efforts staying connected to me and really then to the entire class. As I said, we are at week 5, which means we have 5 weeks worth of material we've now completed. I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to say if you haven't completed all of that material thus far because of any given number of reasons, take the time to do so. I'm fairly generous in how I grade late work. I don't want you guys to dig a hole. It's not about punishment. It's not about you didn't do this, therefore you'll never get to do it. Some points are better than no points, so go back to assignments that you maybe haven't completed, whether they're discussion posts or quizzes, and get those things in. Again, some points is better than none. The other thing with that is we have midterm coming up. Not this next week, but the week after, the only assignment is the midterm exam. This is a large-ish exam. It has 70-ish questions. I say ish because I can't remember exactly. And I don't want you to take for granted this exam. Now, a lot of the material comes from the quizzes. Like directly, the questions from the quizzes will be on the exam. Not all of them, but many of them, as well as some additional material. But all of the material comes from the textbook. The textbook is really our glue in this class. We have the discussions to help us get to know how we think, but our common shared element is the textbook. So go back to the text, reread the textbook. Teachers like to tell you that repetition is the mother of learning. The more you do a thing, the more you will remember it, the more you will be able to access that information. And there's truth in that. I understand asking you to read and read and reread a thing probably won't be the most successful way to get you to engage in the material, but it will help. Especially if there's a quiz you did particularly poor at, go ahead and re-look at that section of the text. If there's something you didn't really understand, try reading it again. The human mind is interesting, and there are times where we can absorb information, there are times when we gloss over information. I'm a big fan of rereading books, good books, and I find interesting things every time I read the book. In fact, every November there's a book that I reread, and I've been rereading it every year since I was 11 years old. And there's new things I find in that. So reread the text, especially if there's things that you found you had a challenge with. Other than that, we recently had our first paper due. So thank you all for getting those papers in. I enjoyed reading them. I enjoyed reading the papers about students who went to a Bethany play and students who went and saw other plays. There's a few things I want to talk about in the papers generally. I believe I emailed you or shared a link in comments to you of the corrections I made on your papers. I wasn't kidding about that very thing, by the way. I think I noted every single time people used the word very in their paper. What I want to draw to your attention before we continue, though, is the idea of a topic sentence. We have a tendency when we're writing a paper to think of it as an essay, to think of it as a continued narrative or a continued narrative of thought. That is to say, here is my idea. I'm going to talk about my idea, and now I'm going to have another idea, and I'm going to talk about this other idea. That's a very natural way to write a paper. Sometimes, though, it can come across as schizophrenic. Sometimes you can say a thing and then move on because you've thought of something else you want to talk about, or in your mind you've answered that question for yourself. And I want to encourage you to slow down. Before you begin writing your paper, and we can apply this to our next paper. Before you begin writing your paper, write down a list of all of the things that you want to talk about in your paper. Let's say you saw a play and you really liked the costumes, so you want to talk about the costumes. You really were very impressed by the lead actress, so you want to speak about her. But there was one character that you just you didn't like. And you don't know why necessarily, but you didn't like him, and so you also want to talk about that. Well, what you've done is you've given yourself topics to discuss. Okay, you've written these things down. Now write down what it is you want to say about that thing. What you're doing is you're creating a topic sentence and a controlling idea. A controlling idea is the thing that you want to say about your topic. So if it's the costumes, you were impressed by the quality and the grandeur of the costumes. Okay, you have a topic sentence. You have a topic and a controlling idea. Now, develop that thought. What about the costumes were impressive? Cite specific examples. You don't have to remember everything there is to remember about the costume, but remember the things that were impressive to you. It was gold, and it was big, and it was a dress. Organize these thoughts. And then in the next sentence, discuss those specific elements. If there's a critique to offer, offer the critique. I thought that the big gold dress was impressive. It seemed appropriate for the character. It may have seemed mildly inappropriate for the setting of the play. But all in all, how the character used the dress and how what the dress did in that scene seemed to fit the milieu of the play. You've now written a paragraph because you outlined an idea, what you wanted to talk about. You gave yourself a controlling idea of what generally you wanted to speak about. This will help clarify your points. And you can do this for everything you want to talk about in the paper. Now, that's for the body of your paper. And once you have those things written out, outlined, and you kind of know what you want to talk about them, well, now you have the material to write both your introduction and your conclusion. Your introduction should introduce the play that you saw, where you saw it, and who produced it. For example, recently at Bethany, we had Bethany Lutheran College's Theater Physics 24. Okay. The name of the show is Theater Physics 24. It was produced at Bethany Lutheran College. You can talk then about your general impression of the show. And when talking about your general impression of the show, say what you feel, and then also say that you're going to talk about specifically X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z will be the body of your paper. Then go into the body of your paper, you write the body of your paper, and at the end of the body of your paper, you write a conclusion. Your conclusion demonstrates that what you spoke about in the body of the paper goes back to support your general impression of the show. And then wrap up your impression of the show. Do this in a way that agrees with your introduction, but doesn't use the same language as your introduction. It should seem as though you've stated something, developed the thought process, and now you're wrapping up that thought process. So there should be a narrative quality to the paper, but instead of it just kind of being a collection of your random thoughts, it should be an organized collection of thoughts that are supported by evidence of the play. Now, I don't say this to deride anyone's paper writing. I say this to help you guys write stronger papers. This is Introduction to Theater, and we are just learning now to involve ourselves in theater and observe theater. So we're also going to learn about how to talk about and how to write about theater. So I thank you guys for your papers. If you have any questions about my comments or if there's things that you're curious about, feel free to message me back. I will also say that I, Jake, have a general policy of that anything that is below a B, so if you got a B minus, a C plus, a C, whatever, you can rewrite that paper and resubmit it to me for grading. Now, if you're going to rewrite that paper, don't just make the minor corrections that I indicated, but look at the paper and look to see if there are things you need to add to it, or maybe there are ideas that you need to further develop. That's what it means to rewrite a paper. It doesn't just mean resubmitting it with the minor corrections that we've made. Thank you guys so much for your work this week. Go out and see more theater. We have 2 more papers in the course of this semester. We have, 8 more weeks to do 2 more papers. So you need to see 2 more plays. Go out and do that. Don't waste time on that. Go see theater today. I'm a theater professor. It's my job to tell you that. Thank you guys again. We will see you next week.